All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to this space. We're super excited to have StakeDAO join us in align with the quest they created on our quest. And so I just want to introduce myself for those who don't know. I'm the head of communications at Paladin. My name is Alejandro. And joining us today is one of our founders, Roman from Paladin, along with Hubert and Hatashi from StakeDAO. Uh, yeah, feel free to introduce yourself.
Yeah. First of all, welcome, guys. Thank you for our friends from StakeDAO for joining us in today's AMA. I'm one of the co-founders of Paladin, Fig, and yeah, we mostly do vote lending, and we've basically been playing around Curve, and we're super excited to have StakeDAO along with us today because they've also been doing some super interesting stuff. Maybe Hubert, do you want to explain?
Yep. Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Hubert, co-contributor of StakeDAO. Those days our big focus right now is on the new product we've launched, which is called the Liquid Lockers. So I won't hijack the introduction by talking about that, but maybe we can talk about it later. Ashi, you wanna go?
Yeah, hello everyone. So Hatashi, part of the founding team at StakeDAO, and mainly on the product and growth team. Really excited to be here and talk a little bit about how we've been working together.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't think it would be as much a hijacking as anything because the liquid lockers, especially the SD CRV, are very relevant to what we could do with Quest and to how they would plug in together. I think that one of the most interesting things, the discussions we can have, but even the work we can do further on, is actually collaborating on this. I've been looking at it. There's 8.5 million CRV today in the liquid lockers, right?
Yes, exactly. So yes, that's one thing which is truly amazing. So to be fully transparent, at the beginning we were talking with one of your competitors for our bribing solution on StakeDAO, but pretty quickly it appeared that Quest is really the best solution in the market right now, and that it's highly synergetic with the liquid lockers. So it's really amazing the things that we can do together. So pretty excited about this.
Yeah.
Our Curve liquid locker right now has 8.5 million CRV locked, which is still small if you look at say Convex or even Yearn, but it's still like a big increase compared to where we were before we launched the lockers. Say 250% increase. So it's going well. We have like great feedback from DAOs and users, and it's like obviously the best the best platform to vote on Curve right now in terms of price per vote, and structurally it should stay so, thanks to our say voting boost mechanism. So that's also one thing which is really key in the liquid lockers. It's all the governance part. So the lockers were done to make sure that protocols who have the tokens don't suffer governance attacks, and so the governance power of tokens with the model is really at the core of this product. So obviously, when governance is involved, bribes are involved. So that's why it's extremely the potential for synergies with Quest is extremely high.
Yeah. So maybe we could start by explaining a bit more what's interesting in Curve, how it works, because I've seen a lot of people mention governance attacks, especially when you guys try to get a gauge on Curve. What's actually really interesting with Curve is that they basically separated political power, which is parameters modification, from economic power, especially around the distribution, the emissions of the CRV token, which is basically the gauge. And what we call the curve wars is basically people controlling the emissions of CRV. So these were separated, and in a sense, Quest is only managing the economic power. So I'm a big proponent against the word bribe because I think it tells people who don't know about crypto a very different story from what we're doing. Because it's actually a financial strategy, a financial game that we're building. It has nothing to do with politics. It doesn't really have an impact on the Curve protocol per se. What's interesting is that we've been seeing two things happen. First, a fragmentation of the VCRV, which means that it's not just VCRV holders, but contracts became whitelisted. If I'm not mistaken, I think StakeDAO was the second one just after Yearn. And then we had Convex that started taking a very big space. And then the second thing we started seeing is that some people not just started fragmenting the lockers, but they started creating meta-governance by creating some wrappers that had a different value. So I would love to have your point of view on that, by the way, on the Curve wars in general, and the fact that Curve has separated this governance game so clearly.
Yep, it's actually a great way to see things. I actually never pictured this separation like that, but it's actually very relevant. So yes, the Curve war, it's really the core of what's really happening in DeFi right now, right? And it has been for a few months. It's basically any protocol who needs to incentivize a liquidity pair, so like either normal protocols who want to incentivize their liquidity, or stablecoins who want to increase the depth of their USD stablecoin liquidity, or even like liquid staking protocols. They need to have high yield on Curve to have high liquidity, deep liquidity. And so that's why it's extremely important for them to have this governance power of the Curve. But as protocols can't vote on Curve unless they are whitelisted, and it's extremely difficult to get whitelisted on Curve, they are using other protocols to vote. The main one until a few months ago was Convex, because they were the only one that was that were allowing users to play this governance game. Now the Liquid Lockers is offering a new solution, which is also interesting. Our opinion is that it's really important to protect the governance of protocol for governance decisions, as you said, and that's why this whitelist mechanism was put in place. For gauge votes, as you said, it's not really putting anything at risk on the underlying protocol, and that's why allowing anyone to vote is actually good for the ecosystem. The risk that we have seen is that big protocols having a huge power could take majority over decentralized protocol and make them centralized. This has happened already for two protocols, which are Curve and Frax, and it's actually putting some pressure on the underlying protocol. So we designed our solution in order to make it like very protocol friendly, and also DAO friendly in terms of DAOs willing to use it to gain governance power for gauge votes, etc. So it's protocol friendly in the sense that the people who have the voting power in our locker, so for example SDCRV locker, then they are still holding a wrapped version of a CRV, so they are still directly aligned with the interest of Curve. So we believe at StakeDAO that this is extremely important. You shouldn't wrap a governance power inside a totally uncorrelated asset. So that's why we do what we do. It's actually, we're getting some great feedback from protocols. You can see that on Angle, our approach led to massive lock of Angle. Also, I mean, maybe it's not correlated, but since we launched the Angle locker, the price of Angle totally stabilized. which was very good for them. So you can directly see the positive impact it has on the protocol. And as far as using the locker for DAOs willing to take power over Curve, for example, we have a few protocols who started to use StakeDAO locker. There was Alchemix, for example. They bought a lot of CRV. They locked it on StakeDAO. They bought a lot of SDT2, and now they are getting a huge edge on this Curve war, right? They're really coming back. And so yes, just a good illustration of what we do. And I think the bribe part, which is, as you said, bribe is not a relevant word, but say the sale of this financial product, which is a voting right on Curve. So this part, which is doable on Quest, this is going to be absolutely key in our architecture.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you for the insights on how the liquid lockers work. I think like we kind of can separate and summarize this in three ways, which is going to rebound on the next questions I have. The first thing that you mentioned that was really interesting is that people are basically acquiring a way inside of the gauge. First of all, that's something we didn't mention, but because they don't want to lock on such a long term. So what I mean by that is that they don't know if they're going to need their locked access for 4 years, their gauge access. So what they're going to do is that instead they're going to buy their way for a few weeks and then see if they need to accumulate as a strategy or not, which is an interesting thing. And the second thing is that it's actually cheaper to buy your way into the gauge than do your own liquidity mining. There's two reasons for that. First of all, very few tokens are as valuable as CRV. So when you see 20% in CRV or 20% in any shitcoin that's on the market, well, most people will prefer the 20% in CRV. And the second reason is that actual gauge acquisition right now are cheaper than the emissions. If you're paying $10,000 today in Quest, you're going to distribute roughly maybe $12,000 or $14,000 of rewards in CRV. So there's a spread which makes bribes viable. What's even more interesting is that bribes or any other Quest incentives can't really go to zero. The reason why they cannot go to zero is that you have a few actors, Paladin included, that have protocol on liquidity inside of Curve. And if the incentive price go too low, it's in our incentive. And I think StakeDAO also has protocol owned liquidity. Let me confirm this. I would love if you could confirm this just after. What it means is that we can basically just buy the floor price of incentives in Quest or in any other system. And we're basically doing the equivalent of buying CRV at a discount. Because at some point, our protocol on liquidity is going to yield more CRV than what we're actually paying for the incentives. So it's a token swap at a discount.
Yes, exactly. As you guys might have seen, we have issued our first Quest this week, which was for CRV. The reason for this is that we wanted to boost our CRV liquidity, and also we have massive protocol on liquidity, and we saw this bribe as a way to generate additional revenue for us. It's actually a bit tricky whether you're going to make money with bribes or not. It depends on your percentage of protocol owned liquidity. But yes, it's a very interesting way of seeing things. We saw protocols like Frax, for example, for very long. They were paying bribes, which were literally giving, send you 1 ETH, I send you 2 ETH back. It was a bit that, but with CRV. So yes, with protocol and liquidity, it's really a no-brainer to use this kind of bribes.
Yeah, and I think it becomes really interesting because, as you mentioned, the first wrappers, especially around convex, basically were creating another derivative, which was indexed to the number of VCRV. So today you have roughly 4.5 VCRV per VLCVX. The problem is that one CRV is equal to $1.30, and one CVX is maybe equal to $8 or $10. So when you're buying one VLC, locking one CVX, you're basically paying more expensive than the equivalent of underlying CRV. And from what I understood, this is mathematically impossible in StakeDAO because you guys basically have the peg between the SDCRV and CRV. So you chose not to get another asset, but your asset is a mirror, basically, of the other asset, right?
Exactly. So this delta you can see between the VLCVX price versus the CRV backing of VLCVX, you can see it as the value of the liquidity of VLCVX, or also the value of the fact that you don't need a whitelist to vote on convex. With the curve locker on StakeDAO, you have liquidity, you have no need for a whitelist, and it's already a CRV. So you have like all the benefits, and there's no trade-off. And on top of that, if you just buy CRV, put them in the locker, you will have one VCRV vote. But if you buy CRV, put it on the locker, and have SDCRV, and on top of that you lock SDT for a certain amount of time, then you get a boost on your voting power. This is structurally making voting with SDCRV cheaper than voting with CRV. And as voting with CRV is structurally cheaper than voting with CVX due to the reasons I mentioned previously, this makes us like structurally the cheapest way to access power over curve.
You know, that's actually super interesting because we've been obsessed over something lately, not just the curve wars, but what we call the concept of meta-governance arbitrage. And what I think is interesting is that we're seeing huge spreads of opportunity between, as you mentioned, for example, voting for VCRV, voting via VLCVX, and voting via SDCRV today. And while we have analytics and websites that are showing it, it's kind of hard for projects to keep being updated in live because this is dependent on the evolution of the peg, on the incentive markets on all of the bribe marketplaces and Quest, and dependent on the actual price of the asset, of the base asset. So there's this really interesting opportunity which should favor SDCRV in general to basically just choose what's the smartest layer at the specific time. And what's actually really cool, which I think you mentioned, is that you guys with SDCRV are basically just adding a new layer of complexity with basically the SDT that can boost your voting power, right?
Yep, exactly. I think, I mean, your idea of arbitrage, of voting power arbitrage is really interesting. However, it's really difficult to measure because all voting solutions have different, say, features, right? So, for example, voting with VCRV, you are locked for 4 years, right? But you take the minimum risk because you are just exposed to CRV. But you totally forget your liquidity, right? Voting with SDCRV, you're trading this lack of liquidity risk for a peg risk between SDCRV and CRV. Because eventually, if the peg is totally broken and people decide to stop, then your SDCRV will transform and become back like a VCRV, a normal VCRV. So you have like a different risk profile. On top of that, you have also different benefits: boosted voting power, rewards also for boost delegation, etc. So it's still a different product. So structurally, SDCRV should be the cheapest way to vote on curve. But yeah, there are some, say, different risk profiles, trade-offs, etc. Still, we believe we have a very solid solution right now.
And there's 18.5 million people, CRV tokens who seem to believe the same. So I think you guys are probably on the right track. There's something really interesting that you mentioned that I wanted to push on. When we talk about curve, I kind of think we can evaluate from three premium windows point of view. There's the speculation premium that's purely in the CRV token. Then we have the governance premium, which is the value of the utility that's actually created by the token, which is something we're trying to manifest with Quest. And then I think you guys are kind of onto the third one, which is the liquidity premium. As you mentioned, the fact that you have to lock and forget your liquidity for 4 years has an impact, right? So in theory, we could actually view CRV through these three different spectrums, like how much is the next person ready to pay it, how much cash flow is it bringing through the utility, and how much are people ready to pay to avoid being locked for 4 years. And that's the last question I asked is kind of, I think, the value of is the CRV, right, with the liquidity.
Exactly. And also you have another premium that you didn't mention is the boosting part. Or maybe you mentioned it. But yes, the full value of Curve is behind the stream of revenue coming from the fees, the trading fee, the boost on the CRV incentive that you have for your LP tokens using Curve, and the governance power. So if you manage to have a token which allows a user to benefit from this without the need of using the platform in its whole, this is like a full win in my opinion. So because with just the CRV, to use the full power of Curve, you would need to have a massive amount of say dollar value in the liquidity pools, and also a need for voting, and generally different people who have stable coins and need for voting and Curve long position, right? So that's why if you manage someone with a long Curve position to get the benefit of those of this boost and of this governance power, you just unlock the full power of the token. And currently in the market, nobody does that. Convex Curve is allowing the boost, also YCRV. YV boost, I think, also same stuff, but the only one with which you can vote and get bribes, etc., is SDCRV. Not sure if I answered all your questions. Yeah.
No, it does. I think there's a concept that kind of shook me. I read a few months ago. It was a discussion that was made by Carson Cook. He's the co-founder of Tokamak, and he was talking about something called greedonomics. And he firmly believed that high-quality assets, for example, CRV, but he was talking about Toke, were always going to end up in the hands of large DAOs and large funds, simply because they were the only ones who understood the value on the long term. So at some point, the best assets would be essentially owned by whales, simply because weak hands are shaken out in periods like the one we're living today, and by simple price moods. What I think is interesting is that what you mentioned, being able to keep all of the utility, to let the users keep all the utility and empower them, which is what we're trying to do through Quest and what you're letting people do through SDCRV, is extremely important, because today CRV is a token that's basically giving you 70% of cash flow. So if we look, I think people who are on the threshold Quest today, or even on the StakeDAO Quest, they're between 45 and 60% of APY, right? You add the 15% of admin fees, you're between 65 and 80% of APY. Then you add the Boost marketplace that's being built right now that we mentioned. You have an asset that's yielding you over 75%, 70% APY a year. And that's actually quite stable. It's crazy.
And you're not even taking into account the vote boosting, which is transforming your 45% APY on bribes into something more close to 150% APY on bribe.
That's actually crazy. And you know what's worse? What's even better is that right now we've been very conservative, and we've been on a soft launch about the Boost marketplace and the way it's being used. But because Boost are going multi-chain, and I know StakeDAO is already multi-chain, it becomes really interesting because your VCRV can just not be used for one chain, but it's usable on all chains at the same time. So what's really cool about that is that the actual value of VCRV is only rising.
Yes, exactly. The multi-chain part is really important. It's a bit tricky to put in place, but it's totally part of our vision. Just very difficult to put in place. But in the long term, we would also like to create an SD token cross-chain, right? So people would be able, say on Polygon, for example, instead of just dumping their CRV, which is currently the main stuff they can do, they will be able to log them on StakeDAO and to vote, right? And how it could work is that we bridge the CRV, we log them, and then we have some cross-chain voting via snapshot. So this would be like just amazing. So it's part of the vision. No precise ETA on when we will be able to do that, but it will be really a massive improvement for the ecosystem, I think.
Yeah, rule one of the builder handbook: never give an ETA on something. It's something we learned the hard way. But so I think we've been going on a lot of broad subjects about Quest and the liquid lockers in general around CRV, which are very interesting. I would love to get your input on how you guys think Quest can help you around maintaining the peg. And then if you want, we can either talk about a bit more macro, what's happening in the market, or just take questions as you prefer, or if there's a topic you want to answer on later on.
Yeah, just so on the peg very quickly, I think one thing that is interesting in our case is that when we boost our liquidity, and we've seen it with the angle locker, for example, when we have a high APY on our liquidity pool, it leads to more locking because people they take angle, for example, they lock half and then they provide liquidity, or they just like single-sidedly provide liquidity, which creates arbitrage opportunity to lock more, right? So this leads to massive locking. So I think we are going to use Quest and bribes as a way to adjust, to incentivize locking more, and therefore, whenever we see we have too much TVL, we don't manage to boost it, we can use Quest to increase our locking to get back to the maximum boost. You see my point? This is interesting. And also, we can use Quest to incentivize deepening the liquidity and ensuring we have a better peg. So that's on the peg question. But also, I wanted to say something. I've been talking to many protocols about our lockers, and especially the curve locker. Everybody is very interested, but not all protocols have protocol on liquidity. And to all those guys, we've been talking about Quest and the fact that we will be allowing protocols using StakeDAO to directly issue Quest, etc. on our UI, and that we're going to partner and make Quest like the solution we offer on StakeDAO for bribing. And so we explained like the difference between Quest and the current bribing solution in the market, and people were like extremely interested. So just like a feedback to you guys, like the solution you put together is extremely cool, and a lot of protocols really like it for two main reasons. Reason number one is the fact that it's what you pay is what you get. So this is really cool when it comes to building strategies for bribing, etc. And reason number two is also this flexibility you have to avoid bribe overlap between different protocols. So this, just wanted to give you this feedback. People are really, even if it's just the beginning and not many people are using it, all the feedback we hear about Quest is that it's really huge. So I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes the standard for bribing.
Yeah, we'd love that to happen. Anyone is welcome to DM if they want to collaborate. We've been trying to take a slower approach, not doing quests that are very massive. Right now, we're managing. We sold a transition roughly, I think, 1.7 million VCRV right now for this week. It's up 50% from last week where we did 1.2 million. I think we're going to try to get over 2 million through our quest next week. So we are scaling as we go. There's quite a few people who've been in contact to discuss and to add them on Quest. To be honest, it's not the challenge. The main thing is about attention and finding the right users so they come in and they vote and participate in this quest. What's really cool is that it's a very different take on the curve wars. Curve wars are super interesting because they're like the first very active governance battle, we could say. There's a few others who are going to come, hopefully, but Curve is by far the biggest. And what's really cool is that up until now, especially with the bribe system, we've seen the big protocols being overwhelming winners, which means that the bribe system were enabling a winner-take-all or winner-take-most system where you would see Frax, Terra, and even Lido at a certain point, capturing the whole ecosystem. And these systems were not helping the smaller long-tail assets or smaller projects grow their way into the gauge. What's interesting is that with Quest, instead, we can create a much fairer battleground that is much less expensive to actually try out on. If it doesn't work, that's okay, but you can actually have a fairer place into the gauge. And what it's going to create is that instead of having 3 big projects throwing a lot of money and creating systemic risk to dominate the gauge, you're going to have maybe 10, 20, 50, 100 projects who are all going to basically be battling around the gauge on a much smaller scale, but a much more intensive scale. And what's really important that we failed to mention today, I failed to mention actually, is simply that governance only has value if people are fighting against each other to actually get it. The governance premium has no value if people are not fighting against each other.
That's totally true, totally true. And I think we see many more battlefields in the future. Balancer is probably the big one that's coming. We just, I think tomorrow is ending a vote for us to get whitelisted on Balancer. We will create a BAL locker. And I think, Balancer is huge, right? It's a 3 billion TVL protocol, last time I checked. And I think it can be, many protocols have their liquidity there. I think it can be a massive war field for this kind of yes, governance wars.
Yeah, I agree. I think that what's very underestimated about Balancer is 2 things. The first thing is their flexibility. Curve is very immutable, while Balancer is very flexible, and the V2 rules give them access to a lot of different things. So we can see a lot more wackier things that are going to happen. And the second thing is that Balancer actually built a ton of partnerships and did token swaps beforehand. So they actually already have tribes that are into the ecosystem. You have Gnosis that has a very big amount of BAL. You have Aave, you have Tribe. So all of these guys are already on the sidelines, or already started playing the war. You also have a lot more players that are doing a convex style thing. I think you have Aura Finance, you have Tattoo, you probably have others. You guys are releasing lockers. So as you mentioned, I think Balancer is going to be an insanely interesting thing. And it's funny you actually guys have a vote that's ending tomorrow, because we also have one ending tomorrow on Balancer to get our gauge under. So I won't say more about our plans on Balancer, but things are going to happen there.
Nice. Looking forward to see it.
So should we take up questions, or is there a subject we haven't glossed over that you would like to discuss?
We would love to take questions.
Okay, guys, if you have any, we're listening.
Yeah, if anyone has a question, please raise their hand and I can bring them up as a speaker.
If not, in the meantime, I would have loved to have your opinion, Hubert, on what's been happening. I wouldn't say in the markets per se, but what we've been seeing. I think uh, market kind of crashed hard in the past few weeks. They've been bleeding. There's a small rebound. What we have seen, and we're discussing internally with the team, is that markets have actually been bleeding out for much longer than the past few weeks. If you look, ATH was roughly in August or September. So a lot of people like talking about bear markets and like comparing to 2017, 2018. I was there, and if I remember correctly, you were there too. It feels really different today because there's a lot of projects, yours included, ours included, who are making revenue. Who It's not just about fundraising or about not having users. It's just that the market is simply grimmer than it used to be.
Yes, I mean, well, I wasn't there back in 2017, so I cannot really say about that. But one thing that's sure is that the funny thing with this bear market, and I see many people saying this, that it seems like a great moment to focus again on building, right? And I mean, I saw many people I've been talking to in different protocols. They all say the same. They say like, it's great that we have a bit of bear market now. We can focus on shipping, and get ready for the next bull. So this is really, really cool. Also, good point. A lot of protocol make revenue. StakeDAO makes revenue. We never raised any fund as StakeDAO. Never got the need for that because it's been a protocol which is profitable from the start, and we're very happy the way it is. So yes, for us, we have now, like in our treasury, enough cash to go through a few years of bear market if we need, and come with an amazing product ready for the bull. So yep.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy that a lot of people are, I wouldn't say sleeping on DeFi, but they've moved on to bigger things, and we're still building the infrastructure, right, for all of this to happen. I think the future is going to be extremely interesting. I don't know if anyone has questions. I haven't seen anyone raise their hand, but it was super cool having you guys discussing about all of these shenanigans around curve wars. Like everything keeps growing up, and we're super happy to see the lockers filling up, and to see basically more things happening. And there's quite a lot of collaborations that are going to happen and keep happening between StakeDAO and Paladin. So tune in our forums, their forums, to follow what's happening. I'm not going to leak anything. You guys are going to have to do the work. But yeah, do you want to say something as a final word?
No, thank you very much for your invitation. It was really great to talk, and also looking forward to a collaboration. We really look forward to have the possibility of offering our users to issue quests directly from StakeDAO. So this will be like amazing. And so yes, looking forward to it. Thanks again, and yeah, wishing you all the best.
And
Yeah,
what will be the best way for people to get involved with StakeDAO and to contribute?
I think just popping in the group chat on Telegram or Discord would be a good way to get acquainted with the protocol, and then just go to StakeDAO.org. Either look at the products that we've been working on last year, which are like the main strategies. We have also the option strategies. I don't know if there are some users who are interested in derivatives. They can find probably like the best derivative strategy in the market on StakeDAO, in terms of past performance at least. And then they can just look at the lockers, get interested. It's a very complex product. We try to make the UX as simple as possible, but we are still working every day to make it as even simpler. So don't hesitate if you have any question, and I hope you will enjoy the product.
Thank you, Hubert. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you, Fige. Yeah, I checked. There's no questions, comments from the audience. Checked across socials. So thanks again, guys, for this awesome space. And if you would like to, of course, find out more information on Paladin, you can follow us on Twitter, and then we have all information there. And yeah, we're excited for what's to come next.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.